Right, next what I'm going to show you is how to actually set up the building itself by introducing the floor plan, building design and in the wizard. First of all, going to projects, setting up a new project. This introduces the wizard. We follow the stages here, setting up the floor plans, defining the geometry, that's the room takeoffs, working on our various services. So we then select each floor plan as a separate DXF file. Obviously in your CAD system they're DWG, you have to convert to DXF, making sure the origin is in the same place so they all line up. We then put our project title in here. The program will generate a generic title called reference project, and it will add those numerically as you continue through the process. So you name your project here. Selecting up the weather database we want to use, and also if we're interfacing with SBEM, we select the SBEM building type. That will load all the activity level and event status details. More about SBEM in another AVI. This building is a 4-story building. We're now putting the floor to ceiling heights in. So if I go and put in a floor to ceiling height, ceiling void depth, and the thickness of the floor slab, I can then apply the drawing units per meter. If your source drawing is being dimensioned in millimeters, set this to 1000 because there are 1000 millimeters in a meter. If the drawing is being drafted in meters as the dimension, then set that as 1. We then go and retrieve the DXF files that we've created, and we browse to the correct location and pick up the floor plans. Open that up and you'll see a bitmap appear. You can ascertain whether it's the correct file or not. And you can see on the left we're beginning to develop the building model, showing the elevation. Pick up the first floor. And so on and so forth up through the building until we get to the roof. Browsing again and picking up the second floor, and then selecting the roof space. The reason I'm putting these floor references in that you can see the level that you're on when you're in the program with the floors. If you've got a lot of floors, if you've got a 20-story building, you want to be able to see which floor you're on without recourse to the DXF file manager, so you can see that will display on the screen. And I will select the roof space. Next we proceed on to the orientation. If I put 45 degrees in there, there's the compass rose going 45 degrees to the right, so this now simulates that this face of the building here is now a northwest face. At any point in the proceedings, even if you've done your design, you can come back and edit the orientation in the building program in the Edit General section. That shows the floor plans line up. In this case they should do, they're from a 3D drawing. And this will then take you on automatically to the building module, where the floor plan will be loaded on the screen, and the first thing you get is the standard elements listing. From a database of standard elements, there is a separate AVI describing this. You can select your generic information you want to apply to your construction. So I'm picking a generic wall type, I'm picking a generic roof type. From the glazing, I can pick up from the database my preferred glazing type. So this means when you define the rooms, every wall, floor, roof, window, door will use the material selector here, but on a face-by-face or on a zonal floor or room basis, you can change the constructions individually as well. Internal elements, the same applies. There's a generic party wall. I'm going to use this to be blockwork with plaster either side. An intermediate floor type, intermediate ceiling type. And also we can set up the profiles on the project. We can import profiles from another project we've done and undertaken, or we can import a standard set of template NCM profiles. So if I want to import those, I browse to the SciMap directory, go into the Files folder, and you'll find a list of profiles. You then select the profile that matches your building. In this case it's an office. So then I can pass across the profiles into the right hand column, which means these are now available for use in the software. There's all the profiles. As most of these looking at the floor plan seem to be a smaller office, I'm going to set the cellular office as my default, so that every time I define a room, that will be the preferred profile. Any others I can select from the pull down list as and when. What I can do now is define my rooms. So I'll define the room. Before I do that, we'll just show you a bit of moving around the layout. There's the ground floor. We can use the view menu ribbon. We can level up through the building, and you can see there's the reference of the floor that I set up earlier. Leveling up through the building, leveling down through the building. You can also show your information box. This enables you to see on the layout the orientation of the building. If I zoom in, this shows me whereabout on the layout I am. And I can pan around the building by just dragging and dropping this little box, or I can just push the wheel on my mouse and drag my layout around. The more you have on the layout at the time as you develop the services, the slower it gets, so be warned. I have my home view, so you can see here you have a series of ribbons at the top that enable you to move around the software. I'm going to zoom in on a room. I'll define this room here, and I'm going to go to the Insert Room Definition menu. There's my reference, Open Plan second floor, and I'm going to set that up as a meeting room. Next again, once we get the crosshair, we're committed to defining the room, so don't click anywhere unless it's your intention to start defining the room. We then click around the inside face of the space, clicking in each corner. If a wall is divided into half internal, half external, then you have to split the face visually so that you can specify the different exposures on that particular face. Closing the room, I've now defined, the program now knows the volume surface areas. What I need to do now is define my material construction details. So it's asking me to select near the middle of the wall. Near the middle means somewhere around the middle, in this case near the middle of the window here. You see the face goes pink. There's the preferred material of the wall. I now need to put my windows in. There are 3 of them, so I apply next element. Click once on one side of the window, once on the other, and then put in my window height. I put in my start height, effectively my sill height. And there you can see the preferred glazing type. There are other windows in this wall, so next element again, clicking across the width of this window. Next element again. Notice it retains the defaults from the previous windows. You can change them if you wish. Moving to the next face, there's nothing else to do in that wall now, so next face, selecting the wall, next element again, another window. Nothing else to do in that face anymore. Again, if it was a door you were putting in there, or a full-size French window or whatever, you could put that in as a glazed door if you wish. Moving on to the next face, this one here, butting the stairwell, is actually internal. This is where the internal tick box comes in, so that you now know it's internal. It now uses the block work with plaster either side, doesn't apply any solar radiation because it's internal, and applies the temperature differential from the stairwell into this space. Nothing else to do in that face. Next face again, defaults to internal, and I have a door. Next element, click across the width of the element. Obviously the most likely used aperture you're going to have in an internal face is a door, so you can move from room to room, so it obviously defaults to door. Again, we can select the type of door we wish. Next face, internal, there's the block work. Next face again, it's now an outside wall, so make sure you untick the internal box. We then go to next element and we select the window again. Again, defaulting to the glazing that you used externally. Next face, selecting the external wall again, and again we have the windows. Next element, once on one side of the window, once on the other. You'll notice in these windows there are actually glazed panels. If you wanted to zoom in, you could define each a separate panel. If you're bringing it in from Revit, those panels will be defined depending on the level of accuracy that you use on the GBXML import. Next element again, so we continue with these windows. Next face again an internal partition. Now if this one was slightly different, we'd had block work abutting the stairwell, there may have been a rearrangement in the office area. and you might want to use some stud partitioning. So if I select internal here, you still get the opportunity to pick a totally different material. Next element, I've got a double door. This may actually be a glazed double door or a timber door. So you can select your door type. You can set the door types prior to the setting up of the project if you wish, or change them. Next face, we're moving on to another internal partition. Again, we'll have that as a stud partition with a door in there, a single leaf door. We then have the internal partition again. We've completed our walls. We then need to do the floor, but bearing in mind we are actually on the second floor, so this is internal and it's looking at the setting up of the floor. And the roof again is internal. If it was an external roof, you would select a selection of external roofs. This is internal. Again, you've got a choice here of how you set that up. And then you finish. Prior to finishing the room, you get the ability to make some changes. So for example, I could edit the profile of the room. I can edit any of the temperature details, any of the ventilation details, any of the occupancy, lighting, equipment, and selecting the part L that I want to use. In this case, it's going to be a generic office area. I can inspect the faces visually. Each of these faces shows an elevation. You're stood in the room looking out, so this corner here is this corner here. If I wish to look at the windows, you can see you've got all the information here looking at the dimensional information of the windows and its position. The start X implies the distance from the corner of this facade. So external window number 3 from this corner here is 8.61 meters. So the distance from the left hand edge of that window is 8.61 meters. So if you're positioning a window by hand, having forgotten to put the windows in, all you would do is add the window in by hand and put the appropriate measurement in along with the window size. So you can see here fairly straightforward entries. Again, you could, if you wanted to, select a different glazing type. And you can see highlighted on the layout the thick red line to represent the face you're looking at. A wall is a wall in sun using the external material. A partition is a temperature difference, which implies it's internal, and there will be an automatic temperature difference applied depending on the temperature of the space and the temperature of the space the other side. In this case, the staircase is 18, the room is at 20. When looking at the room heat loss, you will get a 2-degree loss across that face. That's why the auto tick box is here. If you untick the auto box, you can force a temperature differential across the face. So in winter, for heat loss calculations, you can put in a delta T, and in summer for heat gains. So if the stairwell gets rather hot and you want to impose a 5-degree gain whenever you run your gain calculations, you could put 5 degrees in there. Ordinarily, you would set that to auto so that the temperatures used in the space can be applied. Same with floors and ceilings. Internal temperature difference, looking at the temperature differential based on the temperature of the areas above and below, and the floors as well. Also, ceiling grids can be entered. You can define the tile size and length, tile centre at room centre, intersection at room centre. Select OK, and that inserts your ceiling grid. At any point in the proceedings, you can edit the room space. So all you need to do is select the room. 2 options available to you. A right button click gives the tear off, where you can go into face data, ceiling tiles, profile. The other method is from the edit menu, having selected the room, and you can see here you've got the same option: profile, ceiling tiles, and face data.